Hey sis, and welcome back to the Sisters Podcast. We're your host. I'm Lois.
I'm Bree.
Today's episode, we're going to give you 4 reasons why our young people are leaving the church. But before we get started, Bree needs to correct something.
In many different places, too. So I talk about my favorite verse all the time, and I always misquote it, like every single time. One time I said it was 5:21, and then, but I always say 7:21. Like, I'm always like, my favorite verse is Matthew 7:21. If you know what Matthew 7:21 says, and my actual, it's one of my favorite. My actual, favorite verse is Matthew 6:21, right, Lois?
That's correct. But she literally wrote it on their house-to-house board. That was wrong.
Yeah, they have a board where you sign your name and then put your favorite verse. And so I put Matthew 7:21.
Which is funny because if you know what Matthew 7:21 says, it says, not everybody who says, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, and goes on. But it's just harsh, to be your favorite verse, which is a really good verse, and it's so true. However, if you know Bree, who's always love and happy and joy and all this stuff, and then it's period, queen, not everybody who says Lord, Lord. Okay. So we just had a good laugh about that in the studio, but just had to correct that. Okay, now getting into the topic.
So today we're talking about, like Lois said, why young people are falling away. And we know that our young people in our generation aren't the only ones falling away. But we have recently noticed that it is in that time where a lot of the people in our generation, because they're going to college or they're leaving home, that they're becoming weak in their faith and eventually falling away.
And I think it's also just, that's our age group, so we see it a lot. So I feel more confident talking about it in our age group. However, a lot of the things that we talk about today would apply to anybody, and reasons why anybody would leave the church. We're just talking about it because we do see so many young people falling away. And while it's nothing new, the pool of the world is nothing new. I think it's not limited to young people, of course, like we just said, but I think it's easier for young people because we are so impressionable. I don't know why it's so hard for me to get this sentence out, but because we are so impressionable, and it makes us an easier target for Satan.
And not even just that, but I've also noticed just a lack of desire in general to go to heaven and to serve God. And I'm reminded of when Paul says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. And we're losing that attitude in the younger generation.
And the pool of wanting to have fun or to fit in or to go with the crowd is over, what's the word I'm looking for? It's stronger than the pool of the desire of heaven in our people. And it's like I said, it's not just young people. And I'm coming after everybody who doesn't want to go to heaven. I'm coming after, that sounds harsh. But I mean, this would apply to anybody who doesn't want to go to heaven. Because that desire to fit into the world or to be liked or to have fun doesn't go away when you get older.
Right.
I think you just learn how to... What are you laughing at?
Because I can't help but think of Matthew 7:21 now. Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father, which is in heaven. And so if we're lacking that desire, I don't know, it's just that mindset is kind of, as if I can do the bare minimum, which we know that the bare minimum is nothing.
Do you have a new favorite verse now? Matthew 7:21 actually your favorite?
It actually
subconsciously? I think the root of the problem is our hearts and our souls. And they've become detached from the Lord and his church. Psalm 37:4 says, to delight your heart in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. If your heart is rooted in the Lord, then your desires will be for him. But if your heart is rooted in the world, then your worldly lust will be your desires. I think of just my small youth group growing up and how many from that have fallen away. And I tried to figure out the causes of it and causes of just other people I know. And I think those are 4 of the reasons we're going to go through today. But it's so common. I want people to realize this. We have to do something to stop losing our young people. Because when you grow up in the church, which we're going to go through this some more, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself. But when you grow up in the church, you should stay in the church. You should always be in the church, even if you don't grow up in the church and you come to the church. But I'm saying it's sad that we have more young people coming to the church and then staying in the church than who were already growing up, coming to church, that are leaving the church.
Right.
Why is this? Why are we losing so many? We're going to talk about that. But.
And it's definitely not everyone in the younger generation. Like, we understand that I mean, we speak at different events, and both of us travel, Lois more than I, but we see the desire of these women, and a lot of times, I just putting my feet up. We see the desire in these women, and especially when you do Young Ladies Days, you see the desire of young women, and so we're not just speaking to talk about this topic. We're talking about it because we're talking to those women who are fully devoted to God and who want to help, because there's things that we can do to help people who, especially when it's our generation, because sometimes they listen to, people, their peers more than older people. So we're speaking to people like that as well, so that we can help them come back to the church or keep them from falling away.
So the first reason we're going to talk about today, and the most obvious reason, is bad influences. Some people lead us closer to God or to Jesus, and some people bring us away from him. And this is not something new, but one of my friends recently, I was talking to him, he's older now, but when he was a freshman in college, he went off and he grew up in an amazing youth group, amazing Christian parents, was at church every time the doors were open, was at every extra event, did everything seemingly right is what I'm saying. But he still, when he went to school, fell away and fell into the wrong crowd. Why is that? And I think we talked about this, but we underestimate the strength of the devil, or we overestimate our own strength. I think that it's very common to put yourself in a situation and think, or too common, I don't know if very common, but it is common to put yourself in a situation and think that you're strong enough to not give in, or you're strong enough to not be influenced, or even to think that you're the one who's influencing the majority. And that's just not a good way to look at it. And that's why I think so many people do fall away. They don't go into it thinking that they're going to become like these people, but you are who you hang out with. And we've talked about this several times before. But history shows that you are who you hang out with. And I just think of 1 Corinthians 15:33, bad company corrupts good morals, period. Like, the scripture doesn't say bad company can corrupt good morals, or bad company corrupts some good morals. Bad company corrupts good morals, period. This is a huge warning sign. And for some reason, we often walk right past it and think that we are the exception. A saying I have written in my Bible is, one difference between a wise person and a foolish one is the ability to learn from others' mistakes. And I think that's a good thing to put in right here.
Yeah. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And I think normally when we picture a prideful person, we picture someone thinking of themselves as better than everyone else, or like looking down on other people. But when we enter a mindset of, I have this strength within myself, enough to combat whatever or whoever I'm around, and that I have that ability so much so that I can put myself in situations and still come out strong. And that is also pride. Because who do we get our strength from as Christians? Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And Psalm 73:26 says, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Strength is not found within us. We are this is a hard word. Susceptible.
Good job.
We are just as susceptible, just as that other person you thought would never fall away. And that's why we have to study God's word, and why we have to keep our minds set on him, and why we choose him, because we have free will. We can choose not to put ourselves in or around any situation that could pull us away. And that is being a wise Christian. That's being wise in your Christianity. Proverbs is called the book of wisdom, right? Oh, I just
hit your mic.
Yeah, sorry. Proverbs is called the book of wisdom. And there's so many things about the word wise is used a lot. And in chapter 3, verse 7, it says, do not be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord, and depart from evil.
And I think something to also think about is that we often look to Christians to set the example. And just because somebody sits on a pew with you on Sundays does not mean that you should strive to be like them. And that can be a common thing about bad influences. It doesn't mean that they're out in the world. They can be sitting on a pew with you and still be a bad influence. So don't let your guard down around people who are not living the Christian walk just because they claim to wear Christ's name. And 2 Thessalonians 3:6 tells us to withdraw from a brother who walks disorderly. I've seen too many Christians' faith weaken due to other Christians pulling them down. Paul tells us he is weeping in Philippians 3:18, telling us of many that walk but are enemies of the cross of Christ. That's heartbreaking. And I mean, Bree and I were just talking about yesterday how discouraging it is to see Christians acting worse than some people in the world, and how they can be so hateful. They can be gossips. They can be just, at least in my life, I know a lot of my problems, or a lot of people who cause me heartache, are people who claim to wear Christ's name, which is really discouraging. So we need to definitely be working on that.
And to kind of tie both of these together, I think we need to talk about discernment. We read about discernment in Hebrews, and we know that Hebrews is basically a whole book of encouragement and encouragement to endure specifically. Because what was happening in Hebrews, Christians were reverting back to Judaism, right? And in chapter 5, it talks about how the milk of the word is for those who are unskilled in the word. That's in verse 13. And then in verse 14, talks about the solid food is the one for mature Christians and who are mature in their faith. And so basically the idea is when you first become a Christian, you're learning like basically the ABCs of Christianity. But that's not all, right? We go into the deeper things in Scripture and to try to be able to discern between good and evil. In verse 14, it says, "But solid food belongs to those who are full age, that is, those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil." When talking about discerning between good and evil, we can think of false teaching, deciphering what there is, if what they're teaching is truth. But what we can also do is talk about morally good and what's evil. And like I said, it's a sign of maturity to discern what is good and what is evil. And if we know that it's evil, what do? We abhor what is evil and we cling to what is good. And that's found in Romans 12:9. And I think another thing that just came to my mind was I enjoy like physical exercise, and I enjoy pushing myself to the point that I literally can't walk, or like it just like hurt, or like I literally want to cry. Like I enjoy that.
I don't know if that's healthy.
I enjoy it. And so, but what I want you to think about is this isn't that, like our Christianity. We are not taking ourselves as a Christian and putting ourselves in, pushing it to the point of the line to say. Like, it's not about taking that and seeing how far we can push until, we go over that line. We're staying far away from it. You don't want to push yourself into that point. And a mature Christian understands that, and they can discern that and know, okay, I'm staying away from this because it is a glimpse of evil, and it's just can lead to evil.
And I think a problem is we're not actually growing in our faith. Not we as in everybody, but the people who are falling away.
Right.
They're staying where they are instead of growing. And if you stay where you are, you're going to get weaker. You have to become more mature in your faith to be able to be strong in your faith.
And not risk it. This isn't something to risk. This is important.
Okay, moving on to number 2 on our list, selfish desire. There are some people who fall away slowly, not even realizing it, like we've talked about. But then there are some others who fall away just truly out of selfishness and selfish desire, feeding into those selfish desires. The me mentality is so dangerous. The whole book of Ecclesiastes explains how poorly it works out to follow those selfish desires. Maybe sometime we should do a book dive and study actually the whole book. But right now I just want to look at chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. And I want you to see how many times he mentions himself in these verses. So starting in verse 1, he says, "I said in my heart, 'Come now, I will test you with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure, but surely this also is vanity. I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men, and do unto heaven all the days of their lives. I made my works great, I built myself houses, and planted myself vineyards. I myself made gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquainted male and female servants, and servants born in my house. Yes, I had great possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasures of kings and of provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delight of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kinds. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me. Verse 10. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor. And this was my reward for all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled. And indeed, all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. So in this passage, I counted the amount of times that Solomon mentioned himself, whether an I, me, myself, and I counted 42 times in 11 verses. He literally says in verse 10 that he gave his eyes whatever they desired. And then in verse 11, he says that it was all vanity. It was all useless. Fulfilling our selfish desires still has the same outcome today. No matter what time of day it is, no matter what year it is, no matter who you are, true satisfaction is only found in Jesus. Solomon said in chapter 2, verse 17, that he hated life because of what was done under the sun. He uses the phrase under the sun 29 times in the book of Ecclesiastes, I believe, describing where he was searching for happiness. And conclusion of the book, well, it starts in even chapter 1 where he says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Everything that he did under the sun was vanity because he was fulfilling those selfish desires. He had everything the world would view as true success. He had money, fame, wisdom, friends, family, female servants, music. He fulfilled every single selfish desire anybody could want, and it still was not enough. So why do we think it would be enough for us?
Yeah, he literally says there was no profit under the sun.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think of when Jesus said, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. And that's the part, right, that we have such a hard time with, especially our generation, is denying ourselves. Yeah. And then in verse 25, he says, for whoever desires to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. And then we have, I guess, kind of the famous question, because I've heard this a lot, but it asks, for what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? And too often I think this mindset is in our generation that we do want to risk our soul, our salvation. We want to risk it and push it to the point of well, really no return. And this isn't something that we should be willing to do and willing to risk our salvation for. And it starts with really, I mean, even when you first become a Christian, it's not really like a gradually I'll do it. When you become a Christian and you're doing it for the right reasons, it's immediate. I'm denying myself, because immediately I'm going to, if I'm in the world, I'm going to distance myself from people who are not wanting to listen to the truth with me and who want to continue in sin. I have to distance myself from those people. Even though I may not want to, I have to, because it's what I need to do as a Christian. And so it starts with denying self. And so many times for our generation, that's where the first thing that we need to be doing, that's where it stops.
It also makes me think of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke chapter 16, where think of these two people and think of who we would want to be like. I mean, the rich man, obviously, his name is literally the rich man. So he lived in a palace. He had food enough to spare. And I mean, he had everything that we would think is success, same as Solomon. But then you have the beggar, Lazarus, who laid at the gate just begging for the crumbs from his table, and whose dogs came and licked his wounds. Yeah. But yet, who was better off in the long run? And we see, I mean, if you read the story, it's heartbreaking how the rich man ended up in Hades, And he wanted Lazarus to just dip his finger in water and come just give him a drop of water. Or he wanted to send Lazarus down to his brothers, saying, do not end up like me. Make it right. Listen to these people. And that's just one example. Again, this is another one of those that we could show so many examples we could go through to put into real life. And I think it all comes back to this saying I said at the beginning, is wisdom is being able to learn from others' mistakes. Can we read these passages and realize, I don't want to be like these people? So we should be able to.
And if we have, there's a really wise deacon at our church, and he asked us, what is wisdom one time? And we came up with, different things, but he was like, you can have knowledge, but wisdom is using that knowledge that you have. And so we can, if you've grown up in the church, you're in the church, you can know all the things, but you have to be able to use them. To deny yourself is one of them, but you have to be able to use what you know, and that's being wise in your Christianity.
And Bree and I are also we're talking from experience. We've had to pull back from friendships. We've had to lose friends because they weren't leading us to Christ, or because they were pulling us away from Christ.
I've had to question, Bree, should this be somewhere you're going? I've had to think through it. And that's how I talk to her. I'm like, Bree. But we've gone through situations where we've had to think through our decisions and make sure that we're making the right ones. Because it's not like it's easy for us. Just because, we try to give you all good advice and we try to talk to all of you. It's not like it's easy for us either. So we don't want you to think that we think we know everything.
A lot of times we're talking because we need it. Because maybe we have made the wrong decision and we've learned from it. Learn from our mistakes too. We're talking to ourselves just as much as we're talking to anybody else. And we always want y'all to remember that.
So the last point.
This is 3.
The
we have
third
4.
point is lack of mentorship, training, and discipline.
This is something that I have been super discouraged by as a young adult. If we don't want to lose our young people, then every member of the congregation has to accept their role in youth ministry. Every single member. And we know the older generation is supposed to teach the younger, and Titus 2 is where we read that. But I also think it's becoming less and less common, sadly. We all have busy lives and a lot going on. Trust me, I know. But if we aren't careful, we can allow that to be an excuse to not accept our role, to not be doing the things that we should be doing. And I know that this goes both ways. There's a disconnect between generations, and I know that we can do more, and I know the older generation can do more. And there are so many women in my life, too, who have been a good example to me. So trust me, I'm not saying this is everybody, because there are so many good people who are setting an example and who are teaching, and I am so grateful for those women. I'm just saying that I think that there is a lack of it in the church today. And the young Christians that I see who are remaining faithful are ones who have support from every single generation, too. You lost some thought over there?
I like that you said supported by all generations. And that's our role in the church, is to edify one another. And so as I know that it does start, in the home and being raised, because you're with your family, that's where you live, that's where you are most of the time. But in the church, I think that it is so important. There are so many, specifically I'm thinking of women, who have helped me and helped me learn different things and grow in different ways. And I couldn't imagine if they didn't do that, if they didn't didn't know their role in the church and accept that role. I can't imagine where I would be in some situations. And so I think that it's up to all of us. And even if we're still, maybe you're in middle school and you think that you have no pull and no, or even in high school, and you think that you have no pull, you still do. I've been influenced by, there's this one specific girl, I can't remember her name, but she comes to our, I have a bad memory if you can't tell. But she comes to our Ladies' Day. She has been for the past 2 years, I think. And I'm pretty sure she's a middle school or high school. And she is so wise. We had this thing called Tea and Talk, where we drink hot tea and I ask 3 different questions, and they group up, they talk about it, and then we discuss it out together. And she was just coming up with all these thoughts. And I was so encouraged by her. And I see her more than like twice a year. But when I do see her, she is always encouraging to me. And she's in middle school or high school. Like you are still able to make an impact and a difference on somebody with the way that you are and your Christ-likeness.
Mm-hmm. I've just wrote down some ideas for what we can do to be a mentor or to help others. Bree probably has lots of other ideas as well, but you probably also agree with the ideas that I have, so we can talk about it a little bit. But the first one I had was be a listening ear. Mm-hmm. We all want to be heard. We all need to be able to talk. Bree is on the other end of my conversations quite often. Yesterday, I was having a rough day, and I was just texting Bree, and she was just being a listening ear. Sometimes we just need that, We don't need to be talked to or whatever. We just need somebody to listen to us and to comfort us. The second one I had was to be a source of encouragement too. Something that sticks out in my brain that I don't think people know how discouraging it is when people preachers speaking, or people leading Bible classes or teaching Bible class, or even just an everyday conversation, how much they talk down to young people, to teenagers. I remember when I was in high school, 2 lessons specifically stick out in my mind where these speakers were just dogging high schoolers. And just pretty much anything that is wrong was blamed on a high schooler. Just you expect bad from high schoolers.
Yeah.
And that was really discouraging to me as a young person, because I was like, if you already expect that from me, then I should just do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. If you don't expect better, then why would I be better? We need to stop putting all the blame on young people and realize that we're all trying. But also, if you're just being negative and hard on the young people, it's going to rub off on them. They need to be uplifted. They need to be encouraged too. Okay, the next one I had is to be a teacher. Spiritually and physically, we all have things that we need to be taught. So invest in young people's lives to teach them things that you have already learned if you have more years on them. Be a refuge, a place of safety. Young people often have, or anybody in general, but often have unseen burdens. And they're young people specifically, they could hear their parents fighting. They could be the odd one out at school for not participating in sinful events. They have insecurities and struggles just like anybody else. But sometimes we all just need a place to truly feel secure and safe and seen.
Yeah, and we've talked about hospitality. We have a whole episode on it, and that's not just a physical home and hosting people at your physical home. That's part of it, but it's also just being a home within yourself, which is Christ-likeness, because reflecting Christ feels like home to people. Exactly. So, yeah, it's really important to do.
It is, and that goes right into the last thing I wrote down. It's pretty much the same, but be an includer. No one likes to not be included. It's hard. It's hard to consistently show up at church, or constantly. That's the word I was looking for, I think. It's hard to constantly show up to church or events and not feel like you have a place, to be the odd one out. And shame on us if we're making people feel like that. Yeah. Shame on that if we're not including them. I think I see it a lot in the church where there's just cliques. The church should not be a place of cliques. We should all be, which I think that also goes with also bridging the generational gap.
Yeah, and I mean, mine wasn't, I wanted to talk to everybody. I wanted to make everyone feel included, but I was so shy that, it took everything within me to do that. And so I just wouldn't, because it just scared me so much. But as I got older and experienced different experiences and just loved the church more, that my desire to know people just overwhelmed that other fear, I guess. But sometimes it is still awkward for me to just go up to a random person who looks like they're by themselves or sitting on the pew by themselves, or they're a visitor and they're by themselves. Sometimes it's awkward, but just go up and say whatever, hi. Just talk to them. Just say, hi, I'm Bree. Just go up to them, because honestly, they probably feel more awkward than you do. So just make them feel like you're a home and that they can be comfortable with you.
The Lord's church should be the most welcoming and the most inclusive place on earth. Absolutely. But if young people don't feel like they can be seen, heard, encouraged, or welcomed in the church, they will look for that somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the older generation is going to come up my head for saying this, but sadly, I think why we have a major increase in young people leaving is because the generation above us is weak.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking up to a weak generation, it just makes sense that you're going to be weak because you don't have an example to follow.
Right. And there's a wise lady at our church, and she said the same thing. She said, I think our generation has failed at being an example to the younger generation. So even her being in that generation, voiced that. And like we said, we know that we have our own people who are older than us who are such good examples to us. And I'm so thankful for that. And so we're not saying that it's everybody in the world, but just in the majority.
Yeah.
But I also think that, I guess this kind of goes with being prideful, but that our generation is willing to look at other people and look at the older generation and say, oh, wait, I can actually learn something because actually I don't know everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're out of time, so we're going to quickly move on to point number 4, being raised in good homes, not godly homes, which this also goes along with point number 3 on the mentor. I don't know why this word is so hard to say.
You said it fine just a second ago.
Mentorship?
Yeah.
I got to slowly talk it out. Okay, anyway. The first mentors in a child's life are his or her parents.
Mm-hmm.
Parents oftentimes have a college fund started for their kids at a young age, or they make sure they get a good education. They make sure they're involved in extra activities like sports or band. They take them on vacations. They have clothes and food and all the necessities, and a lot of times things that we don't even need. But what are we doing to invest in our child's? I say our child's like I have kids. But as Christian parents, what are you doing to invest in your child's eternal future? Parents have a huge, huge, huge responsibility in raising a child and training them in the way they should go. Proverbs 16:22, which is in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Mm-hmm. Ephesians 6:4.
Right. And I mean, when they're in your house, you are able to do that. You're able to guide them. And that's what, I'm not a parent. I know that, but that's our job, or that's your job, is to guide them. So, we and Lois were talking about, going off to college. Do you know that there's a good congregation? Did you go and visit the congregation in the area before you just got up and moved? Or if you're just moving somewhere different, have you gone with your kid or your child to see if there's a congregation or, things like that. It's important because even when, they're out of the house, obviously you've done all your guiding in the house. And once they get out of the house, there's a little bit of more independence there, but there's still some guiding that you can do. And that's just a small thing. I met a girl who at a college event, and we were talking, and she was like, yeah, I just now moved here because I'm going to college here now, but we visited like 2 months ago to make sure that this is where I wanted to be. And I think that's wise and that's important to do. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I've said on here before, but parents need to stop being their kid's friend and start being their spiritual leader. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with having a good relationship with your child. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that when you allow them to do something that's questionable because you want them to like you, you are letting them down as a parent.
And if you're scared of hurting their feelings.
Mm-hmm. And I realize that parenting advice from somebody who's not a parent is frowned upon.
But from experience, from
what we've seen. Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is this is just what we've seen. This is what we see time and time again.
And what has helped us as children.
Yes. And if nobody else is going to speak up on it, then I think that we should speak up on it too. But I realize also that a responsibility of a child is to obey their parents, Ephesians 6:1. So I'm also speaking to, if you are a younger person and listening to this, your parents, you should listen to them in the Lord. Of course, the verse ends in the Lord. But.
Yeah, and we understand that at the end of the day, people are going to fall away, even if you've done all that you could. So it's not like you're a bad parent or you're a bad best friend because maybe your best friend has fallen away. But there are things that we can do to, try to help that from not happening or try to get them back when it does happen. And so that's just kind of what we wanted to help with.
Mm-hmm. We just want to reach souls, and if there is something, this is just what we have seen in our lives and just around us in the church. So there's many more, and this could apply, like we already said, to any generation. We're just talking about our young people specifically, but a lot of these would be anybody, the older people who are falling away as well. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that this has been beneficial to you, and we love each and every one of you. Be sure to look us up. Our website is sisterspodcast.com, and be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Y'all have a good day. Bye.